Thank you so very much, Cookie. First of all, let me just say I'm so very happy to be here to talk to you all. Many of you, as I look around the room, I know you. I've had the opportunity to sit down and speak with each and every one of you. Cookie, you don't count because I know you very, very well for a very long time. But I am just so, I was happy to make that I wasn't first, that we were all able to hear from Jessica Sandoval to talk about New Jersey. I know I love talking about New Jersey, but I love it when other folks look in terms of what it is that we're doing, because it's important that not only we do the right thing, but that we're moving in the direction that we can make some real significant changes. Jessica spoke about solitary confinement, and a lot of, as you all know, I'm not gonna talk about the various different pieces of legislation that I've been privileged to sponsor, to introduce, to champion and navigate through the process. And I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it's not easy. The difficulty that Jessica just spoke about is really navigating not only it's the inner political structure that exists right there. So it's not even the outside political factor. It's the inside. It's ingrained in the walls. It really is, you know. So it's really changing that mentality and being able to do that. I've focused my attention on a number of different pieces of legislation, but mostly I can tell you that my passion, my commitment has been trying to make sure that we do what's right for the juvenile justice reform. And here's why. While it is so important to make sure that we look at everything from the very beginning. Oh, I forgot to put my minutes on. I'm sorry, Cookie. I just want to make sure I don't pass my time. But I will tell you that one of I have no idea. I'm not. Oh, I think it's happening. Okay. I can tell you that my focus on the juvenile justice reform is one, because if we do this and we do it right, and we make sure that these laws are in place, that they're followed, that they're properly monitored, that we have all of the reporting mechanisms in place, that you have all of those major stakeholders overseeing what's happening right there, and that our institutional facilities are indeed being prepared or being set up in a way that to prevent this continued cycle of recidivism. But if we get them at a young age of making sure that they're in a position of being better prepared to go back into society and become productive adults, we will not have the problems that we're now seeing inside our adult prison, because they will not be there. And that is really what I think becomes my passion, of making sure that we help to prepare our young people. And as it's been pointed out by Jessica and others, yes, New Jersey has made a lot of progress, and yes, we don't get a lot of credit for it, but let me just say, we have done, and the last two bills that there's three, because we did the solitary confinement for the adult prison as well, and that was something that was taken on by some of my former colleagues, and Senator Lesniak was in the forefront of that at some point. When he's left, I picked it up and just ran with it as well, making sure that we were able to get that passed. we had to make some concession, as you've pointed out, and yes, there was a debate back and forth in terms of, especially on the women issue, any number of different, we had to make a couple of changes. That we had several hours of discussion over the amount of days that was going to be permitted within that period of time. And the original bill had less number of days, but we had to make a compromise. And that's what happens in good legislation. You don't always get the perfect legislation, but you have to have the ability to understand and be able to make those compromises when they exist, when it's for the better good. And the better good is getting a good piece of legislation moving and going, and then we come back to work another day and fight another day to make it even better. And that's been my position all along. But while we've made a lot of progress in the criminal justice reform to make it fairer and more humane in recent years, our job is not done. Our job is far from being done. Just this session alone, as you know, the legislature, we've taken some very important steps to drastically reduce the use of isolated confinement. We've reformed the state's expungement program that through some of my colleagues, as you know, that's championed those particular causes. And we've also had a piece of legislation that helped to improve the health care for incarcerated women through some of the legislation that was recently passed. So yes, we are working in those regards, but let me just say, I want to now focus on my most recent two particular pieces of legislation. One, Jessica spoke about or made reference to it in terms of the isolated, the elimination of the isolated confinement that was actually signed into law back in 2015, I believe it was. So what brought that to my attention was really, I was at a hearing, and it was a budget hearing, and there was a lot of conversation over some budgetary issues within the office of the Attorney General's office. And what really focused, what allowed me to kind of home in on it was that there were two particular lawsuits that was talked about. And while we could not, and they would refuse to speak publicly about those particular cases, it really dealt with two young boys who were placed in isolation for a very extended period of time. So much so that it had a huge impact on their mental health ability and their ability to just be, to be able to be part of society, or just be part of their, their own particular self. When that news broke out on these extreme use of solitary confinement, that's when I redirected my focus. And I redirected my focus on the juvenile justice area. That's when, in 2015, after long discussion, multiple major stakeholders around the table, people that do not necessarily talk to one another, by the way, because you cannot get public defenders, trial attorneys, prosecutors, judges. You cannot get social institute, folks from the social institute, advocates and community leaders, parent advocates. All of these folks around the table trying to come together and have a conversation and agree on any one thing. Well, I got them to the table. I figured, let's do this. We've never done it before. There's always a first time. It took me, ladies and gentlemen, 2 years of ongoing conversations, discussions, massaging, getting their mental views and ideologies to the point where we were able to come to that. Finally, long story short, because I look at my time, long story short, it was signed into law it changed dramatically. It changed the course of the juvenile. You no longer can waive a young kid, a juvenile, from going to juvenile court and automatically waiving them into the adult court. No longer under this bill.
That's historical.
We raised the minimum age of waiving those children to that. We've increased the age of transferring the young people from the juvenile detention center to the adult facility from 16 to 18. Never done before. We allow for juveniles to serve out their full sentence at up to the age of 18, up to the age of 21. And if they were doing really good and they were part of their rehabilitative process and having no infraction whatsoever, they can remain in that juvenile facility to max out or to finish their term, serve out their term without being waived into an adult detention facility. That was huge. That was huge. Cookie, one more minute. So I'm going to jump real quick to the S48 because that's my biggest, most recent landmark legislation. And S48 is really going to make some drastic change in the system. And I think that in itself will allow for the Juvenile Justice Code to change on how juveniles are given a different alternative to, providing them with different alternative to youth offenders. It will allow for, and Jessica talked about this, it will allow to make sure that they no longer have the automatic ability of just having to max out their sentencing and then without giving a fair opportunity of going before their parole, a parole system. By the way, I've changed the parole system. I've done away with the parole system in terms of a juvenile. For a juvenile, this bill now establishes a juvenile panel, a new panel which will now bring in the Juvenile Justice Commission. They will, along with one member of the parole board, under definite different sets of standards, which will allow that. And then I'm just going to give you two statistics because this in itself should really put us all to pause. We talked about the JDAI initiatives, which are so very important, but there is one statistic that I will leave you and then I will shut up. The statistic that I wanted to make reference to is that if you look in terms of the latest data from the JJC, the Juvenile Justice Commission, it shows that Black youth make up about 68% of those involved in the justice system, compared with 13% of their white counterparts. By contrast, Black youth make up less than 15% of New Jersey's under 18 population. So what does that tell us? What does that tell us? The overall recidivism for juvenile was 85%. While it's hard to compare, New Jersey State with other youth justice programs because it's different, right? New Jersey's statistics are way higher than anyone else in the nation when you look in terms of that. So our young people are maxing out under the former system. They were maxing out their particular parole and maxing out the amount of time that they are to serve, and then on top of that, they were being required to go to be on parole. That no longer will be the automatic situation with our S48. I have to stop there, but please know that my passion, my priority is on this particular subject area. As you can tell, we still have a lot to do. Thank you.